Rene, I don't want to hear about Freeman. Just tell me about the tracks first.
Please support this channel by subscribing and leaving comments.
He said when you can get up there and drive, he said we had found footprints, and they apparently come down into the old abandoned pioneer orchards in the foothills and glean the apples, old frozen apples and plums. He said, so I've been, over the last 2 weeks, I've been cruising the roads, and we saw some early signs just this morning. And I'm just thinking, yeah, right. What a coincidence. I just happened to drop in, and you just happened to found the first footprints of the season. So I thought, well, what have I got to lose? Oh, sure, if nothing else, it would be an interesting education in fakery. And so we got in the truck and drove up, and the whole way he was downplaying, and just saying, don't get your hopes up. It's not a very impressive trackway. He said, I don't bother with things like that. He said, I don't cast anything unless it's perfect. I got so many casts. I said, okay. And so we get up there, and here we are. This is where we're at. We're about a half, well, depending on your perspective, a mile and a half from wooded areas, and it's real irregular as the cultivated fields go in and up valleys here. And there are these gullies that snake down in between the rolling hills that are wooded and heavily thicketed with deciduous brush and so forth. And it's in some of these valleys, the gullies, that he's claimed to have found a nest in the past. And there's an old abandoned schoolhouse up this road over here where he has claimed to have found signs on occasion and so forth. The gravel road comes up this direction. There's a farm vehicle, authorized vehicle only access road that comes across here, which we're standing on. And then it winds back up this way and back down this way and up along the gully. So that's sort of the setting. So we're walking from the truck. We park the truck back in the gravel road. We're walking this way and we start to see things. So this is one of the first things we saw. I looked at this and thought, well, that's not telling me a whole lot. It's possibly a track, but anybody could have made that with a little bit of effort. Then there's this one. You've got heel strike, or not heel strike, but heel impression here. There's this push-off ridge, though, right here. And then here are the toes, and you see that the rainwater's caused the sidewalls to start to slump in. Now this one was interesting. It took a little bit of thinking to interpret this, but the line of travel is this direction. Now you can see there is a tire mark. The farmers and the farmers' kids drive these little ATVs all around, four-wheelers. And so this is angled out. You've got the heel impression here, and then here's the midfoot right here. And what's happened, it appears, that it's stepped at an angle, but then it spun on the ball of its foot, and as it pushed off, the toes, in this case it did push off, and the toes drug back. Here's big toe, second, third, fourth, fifth, or fourth and fifth doesn't show up. Dragging back across the instep. I thought, well, gee, that's a little more complex. Then there were, along the shoulder of the road, there were a lot of really shallow impressions. Here's the impression of the big toe. You can just barely see the second, a little bit of the third, none of the fourth and fifth, and here's the outline of the foot. These pressure ridges are very compelling, very interesting. No other disturbance around it. Another one, going back the other direction in this case. Here's the big toe right here, second, a little of third, no fourth and fifth. Here's the general pressure of the foot, very marked pressure ridges around the outside of the foot, indicating not a stamp, not a forceful stamp, but an even pressure across that foot. Another one here, this one was kind of interesting. This stone, well, the stone here under the foot, pressed all the way down to the surface, to the level of the track. You can see the little shadow around it. This one wasn't pressed in, but was more accommodated on the edge of the plantar pad of the foot. Toe end down here.
And these tracks are what, 1 day old?
One day, it was either the night before or the night previous. It wasn't clear to me how much it had rained on Saturday. So my suspicion is they were probably on Saturday night and we found them first thing Sunday morning. Because there were some tire tracks of that ATV, and the Bigfoot tracks were superimposed on the tire tracks. I would have suspected that most of that vehicular travel was probably on Saturday, and so if it had been laid down Friday night, it's more than probably been obliterated where it would have been found.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who owns the property?
Yeah, there's a farmer there, and I asked him about that. He said, yeah, he's talked to that farmer several times, and the farmer doesn't believe in Bigfoot. He says he's never seen anything. And he said he's found tracks on his property several times.
He lets Freeman go up there.
Well, it's just barely off a public road. But yeah, apparently he had no objection to. I mean, they drove by a couple of times. We just waved. It didn't seem to.
Tracks to the road.
Pardon?
I'm close to the tracks on the road.
The gravel road that we parked the truck, we were less than probably 60 yards in from there. And I'll come back to that here in just a second. Let's flip through some of these. Now this one is really interesting. Even though it doesn't have a lot of detail, it has some details that are extremely compelling. That is, you can see the outline here. Here are the toe impressions faintly here. The pressure ridges under the forepart of the foot. But right here is one of those pressure ridges where the dirt has been pushed up, and we've even got the comparable longitudinal cracks suggesting there was nothing restraining that. The heel came off, it pushed the dirt back, and it cracked, just like we saw in the Laverty, or the Laverty track. Now, the human foot, you can see the same sort of pressure ridges around the outside, but notice where the arch leaves this. This is not a pressure ridge. This is the arch. The pressure ridge is oftentimes confused for an arch, but it's not an arch at all. But if it were a human arch, the ball would be situated way up here, and the arch would start way far forward. Okay? A human can't leave a pressure ridge like the one you just saw unless they have hypermobile feet and can bend at the mid-tarsal or transverse tarsal joint. If a human ever pushes up a pressure ridge, it'll be right behind the metatarsal heads or right behind the toes as the toes push off. Okay, here's one of the few shots along the road here. You could, because of the angle of the sun and the thing was moist enough, you could see a line of tracks. We've got left, right, left, right, left, right there. Notice how the right tracks on those occasions stepped way out at an angle, the line of angle, but then came back in line more or less. And I'm interpreting that as they were walking, he's looking back over his shoulder in the direction of the gravel road, which is back here. Now the step distance is not very great here, but the tracks are also very shallow and very flat. It was clearly not walking fast. So there's a good correlation with the dynamics seen in the track and the step length. And then as it got up onto, actually this one's out of sequence as well. We'll recreate the whole thing in just a minute. Here's one as it got up onto a stretch of the cultivated field. So you can see the definition in the toes a little bit better and outline of the foot. And you can see how here's somebody's track here that it's superimposed over. Like I said, it was probably the people that were tooling around on Saturday in the RTV, and then during the night the track to go down. Now this one is really interesting. It's actually in a tire track. Okay, it's muddied up here, but it's stepped. It's a bit of an incline here, and it has stepped. The toes have slid, leaving these troughs, and then dug in across here. And not only did they dig in, but they splayed out laterally. And as you'll see when I show you the cast, there's quite a considerable overhang of mud here and here, such that the fourth, the fifth, and the first toe have actually pressed into the side wall of the track and left a profile imprint in the side wall of the track. So on this cast up here, not only do we have the impression in the bottom part of the toe, but you can see the toe in perfect profile and see the joints, see the individual segments of the toe. And there are three bones in the little toe. And how many bones in the big toe? 2. A lot of people don't know that. And but whoever made this either do it by default or there's one that I think is rather than a slippage, it's a drag out, because there's not a deep demarcation of the toe finally digging in and gaining purchase. So it's a smooth drag out, a smooth plane right along from the bottom part of the toe. And you can see how this one's a little bit shorter, and this one, it just strikes me as if you can see here, as I'm stepping, the other footprint is up on a little bit higher ground, and this just dragged along the shoulder of this little depression. Okay, and then there was a whole series in the plow field, and these were, here the gait really took off, and I didn't have a tape measure. This is one of those situations, the last thing in the world I expected. Everything that I had told other people to do when they go to a track site, get me this or make me this, a lot of it I forgot to do. Same experience. So let me just cruise through some of these, and I'll just point out to draw your attention. Here's that toes, heel. Now this one, it was stepping across a little brooklet, was coming down through a little trough in the field, and so the heel was hanging out over the air here, and the front part of the foot slid in a little bit, and then the toes dug in across here. And as it did that, it pulled all this, caused all this pressure cracking here. Okay, here's some of the casts, a couple of which I brought. Now, here's an interesting point. Right back here is where that pressure ridge is located. And guess where that falls proportionate to the length of the foot? 42%. Right on the mark. I mean, within 1 or 2 points, depending on how you measure, how carefully you measure it, and what landmark you choose. Here's another one of those flat ones. And you can see this area right back here corresponds to that mid-tarsal region right across here. And you can even see details. This is an interesting hypothesis that I want to throw out here just for the sake of argument. There's nothing to suggest that the thickness of the plantar pad in a primate, including humans, with the exception of the heel pad, cannot change in thickness with body fat changes. It might be possible that tracks that are found in the autumn, after they've fattened up on berries and everything, will show a much thicker, heftier plantar pad than tracks that are seen after a lean, long winter. Because I can even see what, sticking through the sole of the foot here, what corresponds perfectly with the plantar tubercle of either the most distal end of the calcaneus or the cuboid. It's probably the calcaneus. If this is in fact right here, the mid-tarsal joint, then right there is the plantar tubercle of the calcaneus pressing through the inferior surface. Now, if you've got Susan Cashel has suggested a 2 centimeter, 3 centimeter thick plantar pad, there's no way you're going to have bony structure pointing through like that. But if that's more variable through the year, and you can also see across here more bony, what look like the metatarsal heads actually poking down through. Here's the cast of the dragon one, and here's the toe in profile. There's the little toe. So you can see 1, 2, 3 segments, and the lengths of those correspond to the proportions of my reconstruction of the toes quite well. And then one of the deeplets, which I haven't brought copies of. Okay. Now one last interesting note is this. Transfigured this picture, which is the toll gate track. Toll Gate, Oregon, about 45 miles southeast of Walla Walla. On the other side, on the southeast side of the Blue Mountains, Grant says this person had no knowledge of Hall. Hall's never reported any finds or sightings on that side of the mountains. And yet, if you notice and compare this, the features of the proportions of the toes of this track to these casts, they're very, very similar. They both have a slightly shorter big toe than the second and third toe. The second and third toes are equally long and rather flared, and the third and fourth toes are really small, which didn't leave impressions very readily in the very flat tracks. This was 1987. That looks like a really good match to me. Okay, questions?
tracks that Freeman took you out to show you, did you find the beginning and ending of the tracks?
Yes, that's what I wanted to come to. But he was pointing them out to us. He was walking along, he's walking ahead of me, and I'm sitting there snapping off pictures, and he started talking with my brother and showing him things. And he was saying, we parked the car over here. We walked in about 60 yards, we started picking up clear tracks. He said, it looks like it went along this way, and then it crossed down across the plowed field, and something spooked it down here. He thought it was going down towards the orchard, which was down at the foot of the gully, at the head of the gully, or the mouth of the gully, whichever. And then something spooked it, and it came running back up the side here, and then it went back this way. And I thought, oh, how convenient. They start watching where the cars park, make a loop, come back and disappear. So we took him home, dropped him off, ran to the hardware store, bought several boxes of plaster and a bucket, a stick, and ran back up there. It was getting late in the afternoon by now, starting to rain. And I thought, well, if they're real, there's got to be some sign up here, either along the shoulder of the gravel road, or there was another access road that went back straight towards the mountains. We walked up and down that for about half an hour and couldn't find anything at all, not a mark. Found a coyote scat, which we sat and scratched our heads at for a minute because I'd never seen a coyote scat before. But it wasn't a bucket load, so we took a picture and left it. But it had rodent hair and rose hips and things in it.
Started at point A and ended at point A?
Well, no, we came back then, and I thought, well, now, if they're real, they had to come from somewhere. So where? The only other option is down one of these two roads. There's one that veers up, again, parallel to this one, or there's the one that goes down a little slope and then curls around and parallels this gully. So Mike went up this road. He looked up and I couldn't find anything. Then we came back, and I was working on the corny cast. Came back and got me, and we went down this road. And that road was harder to search because that little brooklet that I told you about, when it came down across the road, it tended to just run down at an angle across that road and it washed away a lot of the mud and silt. It was very gravelly and lots of clumps of grass. And so there weren't a lot of places that it would take tracks. But we looked real carefully, and sure enough, about 10, 20 yards down, we picked up footprints going both directions. Three good clear tracks, well, a good clear outline, put it that way. There's no question in my mind that there were tracks on that road. And then so we followed them back and came back up, and then the way it would have come, we would have suspected it would have come. And on this little road here, where Paul hadn't shown us anything, there were tracks. And when I literally got down on my hands and knees and was crawling next to the trackway, and then we were finding each step. I counted over 35 to 45 individual tracks, roughly, in estimation. They came up onto that main dirt road where you saw the one shot with the plaster cast in situ in place. They came down along that road, and they were heading down towards where the car was parked, towards the gravel road. And that's where I think something spooked it, because then all of a sudden they turned back around. And as they were walking then back this way, that's where you get about every second step there was something like this. And it was step, 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 and then it would look over its shoulder apparently. And then the third time it did that was when you got that spin and drag back. And then it really started to run, because the next, within the next series of tracks is where you got the one, this track with the slippage and the drag out. And in this one, the heel never touched. This is not the heel. This is just overflow because I wanted to preserve the pressure ridge that was pushed up. There's no indication of heel strike, so it came down on its forefoot. And the stride was increasing. By the time it got up over the little rise onto the plow field, I had to run and jump to match its stride. So it was, well, I haven't actually estimated what that would be, about 40 plus inches, 45 inches. And there they were sinking in 2.5 inches, 3 inches. They went down across that field, and then there was one track on the downslope road heading back towards the direction of that gully, which I suspect was the route that it would take back up into the hills. Now, I wished I had stayed overnight and searched up the thing. I mean, there's a lot of things I wish I had done in hindsight. As it was, I cast 7 impressions, 7 tracks, and photographed all those.
I'm trying to be really polite.
Thank you very much.
I want to tell you something. This is your first experience with the likes of Freeman, right?
I don't want to. about Freeman. Just tell me about the track.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.